This is the verified testing monthly internal customer call for January 27th, 2021. It's our first one of 2021. I'm gonna just vocalize real quick a couple of the roadmap deck changes of note. Code testing and coverage moved up from minimal to viable maturity in January. Super excited about that. And we are in active development on that code quality epic that we've been in development on for a while to resolve those open dogfooding issues and also move maturity up to viable. Been getting great feedback from customers, from Twitter, from the forums, of people who want those same kinds of features. They solve problems for them in the code quality space. So really excited about that. The other thing I wanted to call out was our Think Big discussions. We do post the recordings to the team playlist. I'll put a link to that in the description of this video. And our latest discussion was with Package about getting some team-specific data out of the monorepo. In this case, they were interested in understanding what's the test coverage for the area that we cover or that we're responsible for. And we do have a follow-up issue on deck for that in 1310. The team will be producing a coverage report for our stuff out of the monorepo. And then we'll be circulating that with some engineering managers of, imagine this was your data, how would you feel about it? So figure out what problems that solves, or if there's still problems out there we need to address with that type of capability. And after that manual effort, we can figure out how to build that in. That's everything for me from a high-level view. Ricky, it looks like you have the first data point. Would you vocalize?
Yeah, since we have Kyle here today, I was just wondering if he could share with us the latest on the kind of dynamic test mapping, early test failure stuff that they've had going on over there, and if there's anything that we can do to help out.
Yeah, the succinct summary is we're kind of at a pause on it. So the recall rate was really low, and we were facing a situation where we'd have to kind of endlessly adjust and change. I think it was around 85%. So that would mean 15% like what we saw is 15% of pipelines, we had the minimal jobs pass and the full jobs, whatever the full suite that was run for that MR fail. And we were hoping for somewhere north of 95. That 15% difference wasn't a lot that we can move forward on. What we're looking to do with the information is starting to focus on mean time to failure and see how we can use that data to just accelerate failure overall. Kind of like what we did with with the FOSS impact and other things there, which was the original. I'll say the originally we were looking to swap out the full test suite for a smaller one to save on cost, but now we're just looking to see how we can use the results that we got to accelerate failure. Mean time to failure is going to become like a much bigger engineering productivity metric that we focus on over duration and the other ones that we traditionally duration and cost in particular. We're kind of hitting the point with cost where it's diminishing returns, and we just want to make developers faster at getting the information they need. As far as how you can help, like I said, we're really on pause, so it's hard to say. We kind of set it aside and we're revisiting after we look at priorities for the next quarter and how to fit in the work to accelerate the accelerate failure. So I don't have anything great for you all on this, unfortunately.
Is there anything that you can think of from your efforts and work that you've done on this that might be worth commoditizing and incorporating into the product in some way? I know you talked about how you experimented and it didn't really work out, but now we're talking about mean time to failure and how we can accelerate that. And you got some data from what we were doing before. So is this something that we can build into the app somehow? Can we introduce a template or an image or something that we can, sell people?
I'm sure there's some value to customers that can be gotten from this. Nothing is coming immediately to mind. Let me prompt Albert and see what comes to mind for him. He usually has a lot better insight on that than me. So I'm going to ask him in the issue and CC you all on that right now.
one thing that comes to my mind is the work that you had done to cancel the pipeline in flight in order to make the fail fast work. I feel like incorporating that into the product in some way would add a lot of value. Talking to my friends and ex coworkers who are in the industry, a lot of them are looking into that type of thing now. Is like, how can I save CI minutes by bailing on my pipeline early? And like that's not necessarily a given or an easy thing to accomplish right now with GitLab CI. And so providing them with a tool that just at least shows them how to do it with the API, I think would add value.
Yeah, so I can at least point you to that. It was all done through the API, so just API calls. Let me take the action to provide you with that, because you're right. I think that was done as a part of the FOSS impact. So that's one of the reasons why that didn't come to mind. Ideally, well, my thinking, I should say, is it would be great if there was almost like a short circuit setting on like allow failure. So like if this job fails, just stop everything else. Or like not cancel, because then the status reporting gets a little weird, but that's how we implemented it. But ideally just halt all other jobs in progress, because we want to know about this failure right now. And everything else beyond this point doesn't matter. Maybe that's a little excessive, but let me take Let me take the action to just provide that information.
That, for what it's worth, that does seem like a feature that's general enough to package as a product. You know, just it's very unconcerned with what the job is. It just says, you know, if something fails, stop the presses. That might be amenable to sort of repackaging in a general way. I think that makes sense. Thinking about from like a CI template perspective, like we can produce something that I think will be easy for people to pick up and get started with that, at least.
So I'm unfamiliar. How is this different than the current state of the pipeline?
So what we're talking about here, like short circuiting the pipeline, already existed. So I wouldn't say it's different than the pipeline today. It can be something that's harvested though, and essentially just the pattern is reused in the template is how I see it. Is that what you were, I guess, Ricky, maybe I should just let you speak on that.
So my question is, if I have a job that fails today, it kills the pipeline. Where is the savings in, like, I'm not understanding how it saves you runner minutes if the pipeline is going to halt anyway on
so
that
with
job.
DAG, so with the needs implementation that we have in our monorepo pipeline, we have jobs running in lots of different stages simultaneously. My understanding might be wrong here. If you're not using DAG, you have a job fail, everything stops at that stage in the pipeline. But with needs, you can have things running way far out, and you have to just wait. So you can have a job fail 10 minutes into the pipeline, but because of everything else that's running, you actually get that feedback about 30 minutes later.
Gotcha. Okay.
When I say feedback, like the email, the status on the MR would be fail. You'd have a job status that has the circle with the X in it, but everything would look like it was still running.
Because the job failure will stop newer jobs from running that haven't started yet. But if you're doing a lot of parallelization, the jobs that are already running won't stop executing. Is that accurate?
That's my understanding. Yes.
Right. And so the API call can jump into those running jobs and say, no, stop now. We really don't care. Just stop everything.
That makes a lot of sense, because if you have a test job that's just like a smoke test and that fails, you want to kill those long running tests if you're running everything in parallel. And they're like, whoa, don't run that hour worth of tests. Stop right now. And hopefully someone would set it up so that runs a stage earlier, but
yeah, and so you could do exactly what you described, and we could actually configure needs to set up the dependencies like that. Our problem is there's a needs limit, I think that's like 50 per job. And since we use parallel on all of our test jobs, the monorepo is very limited in how we can implement needs when we start going, when we start talking about like our spec jobs or anything that
Yeah.
would depend on them, we go over the limit.
Gotcha.
And this is definitely something that is increasingly useful as you have more parallelization. Like in a fairly standard job after job in your CI file configuration, you're not going to get anything out of this if all your jobs run sequentially. And if all your jobs run in parallel, you'll see the most possible benefit. And so where you fall in that spectrum will depend on, we'll decide how useful this feature would be.
Cool.
Yeah, so to your point, I think maybe it's not something that is important to a large, I don't know our customers very well, but we may not have a lot of customers that have high parallelization like we do, where they'd actually get value out of this.
I think this goes back to conversations that James and I have had several times where, yes, the majority stats wise of our customers may not see the benefit, but the ones who do are going to be the bigger customers. They're going to be the people that are using the product to its fullest and are probably having lots of engineers participating and are very concerned with the speed of their pipeline.
Yeah.
I'm kind of interested now in working that into the needs or the rules syntax somehow, where like, oh, if this job fails, then you should, pull the plug on the whole pipeline kind of thing. And having that as part of the GitLab CI YAML configuration is kind of compelling.
Yeah. And yeah, maybe if we can get the needs limit raised, I'm not sure. Like, I just think that's something that hasn't been relooked at. I'll say the problem kind of gets the magnitude of the people who would probably want this would continue to decrease.
Yeah, I think that's, I can poke around and see what the current state of that is. I'll take an action item to try and figure out where those conversations are at, and if they're nowhere to poke at them again and get them going.
Yeah, I was just trying to find the issue. I recall it from probably about a year ago. Raise the limit. Yeah, I'll link to it. Oh, it's closed now.
Cool. So I was curious, Kyle, if there's, and we talk a lot about testing and unit testing and trying to get that feedback loop faster. What other areas of testing around like accessibility or the browser performance can we make some impactful improvements on, so we can pull that further to the left and work it into more of the developer pipeline at GitLab?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think with the recent focus that we've talked about around code quality, that's an area where, as the feedback becomes more applicable to the merge request, that's an area that we can look at. As far as the other areas you mentioned, accessibility, browser compatibility, well, I can take that back to the other like QEMs and see, because I think that's just a blind spot that we have right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, let's see what they let's see what feedback they have. I think we're always open to that, but we want to be very careful with what we add and the feedback it provides to developers. You know, we get feedback both directions on that. We're like, hey, this is great that we're doing this now. But for every positive feedback, we tend to see a lot more confusion or negative feedback, which is on us to communicate better. But
There's
we can,
one,
and the other, and I guess one more thing on that, we do have the ability to like run jobs at a lesser frequency. So there are certain things that we delegate to run like every night. DAST, for example, we run like a specific DAST pipeline that runs all of their DAST scans that reports to the security team for analysis and audits. We can always start with something like that. I'm just not sure what we do from like an action perspective with the results.
It might be interesting to do that for accessibility and just drop the results into the accessibility Slack channel. Even if it's only
and
once
get
a
a
week.
baseline.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
like here's 4 pages. Go scan those 4, even if one of them is just a perpetually open MR, and see how things are behaving. Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. The other thing that I'm hoping to get some insight into, because we see it continue to see an increase in the number of jobs that are generating data for the metrics report, the custom metrics. Trying to get a better understanding of how we're using that at GitLab and where the holes are in that, because I think we've had one issue in the last 18 months that relates to that feature. So we've barely touched it as a testing group. And it's still getting more usage overall on GitLab.com. So trying to understand better how GitLab is using it and how that might inform future roadmap for that so that we can make it better.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with those. You say custom metrics, right?
Yeah. Metrics reports.
Yeah, this is really embarrassing. Yeah, I don't really know.
Let me see if I can find an MR with
That's
it in there.
that's
That's part of the
super
problem.
topical. Yeah.
Yes.
So the thing about metrics reports is when I learned what it did, I was like, wow, this is super cool. You could literally do anything with this. So all you're doing is you're outputting a text file in your job with the open metrics format, like the Prometheus metrics format in it. And then it compares that with the base pipelines version of that report. So you could put literally any metric you want in there manually or automatically or whatever, and then it'll compare it against the base pipeline in the merge request widget.
Where can I learn more about this? It sounds like there's definitely some value. And again, I'm sure it's like in the deck. I'm sure I've seen this like 6 times, and I'm just, again, very, very embarrassed here.
Docs page. That's a place. I'm looking for an MR that's going to have it in there. There we go.
Okay. Let me take a look.
So, and I'm just going to share screen for a minute. So it's this widget here.
Okay.
And I don't think I've ever expanded it actually on an MR. So I'm not sure what's in here or what is useful.
Yeah. So this is just this looks like it'll be some measurements around from Prometheus. It looks like it was generated by about megabyte usage and stuff like that in the bundle when it was building the bundle. So that's one example of something you can use that for. But like I said, it's just open metrics format anything. So you could, I don't know, you could put like how much electricity the runner used when it ran, or like anything.
Yeah. Let me bring this up with the team and see, maybe this is a place where we can surface it. So can you fail something on the custom metrics report, or would we have to like read it? Like it's essentially just information presented to everyone.
Yeah,
right?
it just dumps into a text file, I think, and then does a compare that way. So you could fail on it, but it would require some custom scripting to do it.
Yeah. Okay. Like one of the things that comes to mind is there's like a lot of danger logic for like the front end, like Webpack size. So being able to compare that to a baseline and then putting that information in, I mean, it would just be shifting from danger into something that's standard in the product and therefore maybe like harvestable and usable. But yeah, let me see what could be done here.
Cool.
I too have never expanded that though, for the record. Yeah, that's interesting.
All of our MR widgets are very important, Kyle. You should be looking at all of them.
I do understand that. Every time we talk, I always am like, well, I'm not looking at MR widgets enough.
And
Even if
when we
what
fix the metrics widget, it'll be even more important.
There you
But I
go.
think it's still doing the wrong comparison like code quality was doing in the past. Or Drew, is that right?
That is right as far as I know. I recently worked on an issue that I found out was like mostly fixed like a week ago. So I'm currently hesitating to speak to the state of any problem, but yes, as far as I know.
Okay.
That covers all of
Yeah. So
my ad hoc topics. Sorry, Kyle,
Okay.
go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say, I think the action there is just for me to mention, like, ask the team and see is there. I'll read up on the feature and then ask the team about different uses that we could have for this.
Much appreciated.
Hmm.
Cool.
So I have like 3 takeaways, right? Ask QEMs about the other testing, and I can also ask engineering productivity. One of the things to consider is if you're looking to use those features as a part of like moving them to viable, there's that option I talked about where we can run it on a different frequency and do something with the data. And then, yeah, the other action was getting with Albert on what could be harvested from the dynamic spec analysis. I feel like I never have anything fun for you like to bring. It's always like, if there's something more I can do to help prepare or bring something to the meeting, let me know. Okay.
It's always a pleasure to have you.
I was going to say, you don't come to us demanding reprioritization of the roadmap, so you're one of the best customers.
Well, I feel like you have other people who are doing that too.
Yeah,
like,
we get plenty of that.
You don't need one more cook in the kitchen.
You
I
know
will say,
you know
like,
the struggle.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Because I kind of help like manage the team and also try to manage the backlog for engineering productivity. It's kind of very, very hard. But one of the things I was going to ask about code quality, so there's a team member who's looking to become a maintainer on the team. And I'm hesitant to just like spell it all out because it's recorded. And part of the feedback they got from the maintainership program was maybe doing some development on features, since our team doesn't work as much on features. They've done development for you in the past on things, if that's a clue to who this might be. But with the code quality work, it was something that came to mind as he and I were talking about work streams that we're looking to dog food and that need some feature development. If there's work that's holding you back that's back end on that, or that's like not prioritized but needed, let me know and I'll see if this person can help out a little bit. It kind of aligns with what their learning and growth objectives are.
Sorry, I was just taking some notes there. Yeah, we can absolutely do that as we go. Nothing springs to mind at the moment. We are having some technical issues with the limitations of our shared runner Docker configuration, particularly the Docker in Docker configuration, where we're at the point now where we're not sure if we can speed up the code quality job at all because of the way the caching layers work with the shared runners. It's kind of like it pretty much needs to pull all the Docker images from scratch every time the code quality job runs on the shared runners instead of being able to cache it. So that's kind of, Drew, forgive me for summarizing your work. Does that sound about right?
Sounds exactly right. There's and I think we talked about this a little bit for our internal project, that there's a being unable to cache images is the price we're paying for for operating in a strictly disposable environment, because caching is not disposing of things. And so as long as the shared runners prioritize that disposability, we're not going to get caching. And so it's a use case specific trade-off between those things as far as we can tell right now. And we don't have a good answer for we don't have a good middle ground for that.
So if like we don't use the shared runners, is there the potential that customers or us, we have the issue to look at changing the configuration? That's essentially to overcome this problem for our private runners, right?
Yes.
Okay. That makes sense. That helps with the kind of the background on that. If we can prove that out, then we can have like a quantifiable benefit of our own use case to say, here's the improvement that we saw based on the scale that we run it, and kind of reaffirm that benefit. The other thing that I guess comes to mind that's kind of related, in Q1, we're working with infrastructure to try out some new machine specs for our private runners. I'm going to link to that. Sorry that I put it in front of everything. But this may also just have some general benefits for different test-related jobs, code quality, as well. So we might get some data points on using, moving from N1 standard 2 to different machine specs leads to these type of performance increases on a job-by-job basis.
Are we talking about trying out different specs in particular for different kinds of jobs? We're talking about like having RSpec runners, having DAST runners, Jest runners, that sort of thing?
I think it's more just a general fleet for our private runners at the moment, but we are going to test different specifications to see the performance on a job-by-job basis. So we'll have the data to know, RSpec jobs are maybe CPU bound, so these ones perform better. Other jobs are maybe memory bound, so these type of machine specs will be better. And then we can make a decision.
Sorry, I was just saying, just for clarity's sake, we're talking about different levels of VM because our providers offer different speeds of CPU with different RAM allocations or SSDs or something.
Right.
Like that.
Yeah. Sorry. That's I guess yes, that's what I meant. This size VM for these runners for these jobs, and this different VM for other runners for other jobs.
Yeah, and there's not to say that that's not the decision we'll make going forward. But I think it starts with gathering the data, and then we can assess the cost and the value we get out of the complexity of managing different runners for different jobs. I think it's what's easier right now is having one general pool. It's like the elasticity is easier to manage versus like growing pools for different jobs. It's not unsolvable, but I think it's
Is this related at all to looking at moving to Kubernetes, or is it completely separate?
This is separate. Moving Kubernetes for our runners, like our hosted runners. Yeah, I think this is separate from that. The issue might be related to upgrading some of the components that have already migrated to Kubernetes to different machine specs. There's a lot rolled into this, and one of them is looking at our own private runners. So just as if you read through the description on the issue, there's a lot there, but the engineering productivity part is just the runners.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm all out of topics too.
So I could talk about profiling, build nodes all day. That's my jam. But we can do that at a different time.
I am curious. Actually, a question comes to mind. So the team, our engineering productivity is really passionate about trying to do something better than we are with like eSpecs inside of the mono repo. Mm-hmm. What are some things that we can leverage inside the testing, like functionality, that maybe you don't see us leveraging that could help reduce or at least measure the frequency of flaky specs better on a test-by-test basis?
Have you looked at the test failure history? I beat James to it.
No,
Test
no.
failure
Yes,
has
you have, but in the wrong context. You've looked at it from like, well, we have all this stuff in the database. Can we use it? And not as to what we're using it for yet. So my question is, we're starting to put. I'm going to answer your question with a question. We're starting to put the results of tests that failed specifically. So we're starting to log like, okay, this is a test case. When it fails, we log it in the database. And this is when it failed and what pipeline it belonged to when it failed and what time it was and blah, 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 blah. So we're starting to aggregate that data in the database and have it long-term. Like what can we do with that will help you most? Because we're kind of just like, well, we're going to make a little notification badge in the MR that says that this has failed before in the default pipeline. And that's all we're doing with it right now. If you had like concrete things that we could do with that data in order to improve the lives of people in the quality department, that would be helpful to us to figure out what we should do with it next.
Yeah, so I would answer that as what the question that always bothers me is how frequently does a specific test fail on pipeline, like on a pipeline basis. Ideally, we'd be able to look at like master and MR pipelines, but it's how often is it failing, and then almost like how often over time, so that we can see, is this related to just like a master broken where there's like a spike on one day and then it just drops off, or is it like a consistent, you know, I don't know, let's just say like 1% of all runs of this test fail. We're talking about, go ahead.
Say the logic that we built in specifically excludes the first case of if more than some percentage of, or it's some hard number of tests fail, it just abandons it and it drops that data on the floor. So we don't record that as a failure. Did I
think that's good to point out, but I'm not sure that's quite what Kyle said.
Talking about I want to know if like there's a bunch of failures on one day, there's this weird spike versus it's kind of flaky or floppy over time, right?
Right, but it's for like one test. So if one test fails 10 times in one day, that's the spike. But if one test fails once every week, then that's the more like spread out thing. But the thing that the feature does do right now is if the whole pipeline just blows up and something went horribly wrong, we don't bother logging that every test failed because it's probably unrelated to the test. It's probably the misconfiguration. So we don't log that data on purpose.
And I think my example of master broken is super premature optimization. Ideally, we'd just be able to say this test fails at this rate across merge requests and master pipelines, or you just say pipelines, and we can filter down from there. Maybe that data is already available with API calls. Or I should ask, is that sort of data? So it sounds like we're tracking it. I've looked at test failures from like a end-to-end test perspective. I know we capture the information on the GitLab pipeline. Can we get that sort of failure rate information from what's what's available in the API?
So right now, the problem is manifold because we were very concerned about the scalability of storing this in the database. It turns out that it's the way that we've done it and the way that we've mitigated it in certain factors has helped. But currently, we're only logging failures on the default branch. So pipelines that are ran on the default branch. So we'll only be logging it for pipelines that are run on master. With that, we were kind of split minds on this. It was like, how useful is it if we just tell people that, oh, this test failed 20 times on any pipeline that ever ran in the last 14 days? Like, is that more or less useful than this test failed 20 times on the default branch in the last 14 days? So that's what we're looking at it right now over a 14-day period. We're not currently aggregating it. And then further, because we're concerned about the scalability of the feature, we're not actually storing the whole test name in the database. We're just storing a hash of the test name. So it's a fixed length because we were worried about people having like really, really large test names in their files and having that in the database and causing issues with that.
And and the volume of data is quite tremendous. Like when you look at our projects, just the amount of data.
Yeah. So with what we're storing right now, we're actually not seeing, it's not too bad with the way, with all the caveats that I've just explained, only logging test failures on the default branch, not logging any failures if there's more than 200 in the whole pipeline. So it'll just ignore it if there's more than 200. And further, we're also looking to probably purge that on a 14-day period currently. And
Okay.
also we're not storing the full name. So given all of that, we're actually not concerned with the expansion that we're seeing. We're seeing about, I don't know, we're seeing an amount of increase that I know the exact number of, but this is a recording. And it's not concerning to us. But and who's to say what that rate would be if we included every pipeline and not just the default branch pipeline?
Mhm.
And is it worth it to investigate that avenue from your perspective?
I don't think so right now. Like, we are still like in exploratory mode of what data we want to capture. We'd want to capture what's available in the product. And really what we're looking to do with it is make more informed decisions about what to focus on from a flaky spec perspective, what to automatically quarantine, what to kind of signal boost to EMs and say, hey, this spec failed 2% of all pipelines. Because we're seeing a larger impact to developer productivity than we anticipated based on flaky failures. Like, our merge request success rate at the pipeline level is 65% on average, which was surprisingly low to me. And if we can cut flaky specs out of that, raise it up even higher so that feedback is more actionable.
So what kinds of things are you doing or have you been looking at for pulling that more to the left, right? Like it's one thing for it to, that number is high to be failing in the app, right? But how have we tried, what stuff have we done already to try and make it easier for engineers to run the tests locally so that it's failing there instead of failing on machines that cost money?
Yeah, that's what we were looking to harvest from the dynamic spec analysis piece, where we'd essentially use that mapping, tie it into the left hook, which is kind of our default pre-hook tooling right now, and run tests that are most applicable to the files that you've changed, be able to empower people to do that very easily locally. That's our goal on shortening the feedback loop. I think we're looking to just take more automated actions based on frequency of flaky failures with the data we were really talking about.
Yeah, so given what we have in the table, if we didn't change anything, we could build something into the product where you would feed us the name of the test in a certain format, and then we could feed you back how many times it's failed on the default branch in the last 14 days, basically.
Okay. Let me just refine this. Like, I really just brought this up on the cuff, I'll say. So like, that sounds great. Let me, I'm still kind of in the team is really passionate about this. We have a lot of priorities. We don't have a good plan on what we want to do. What's the smallest thing we can do to add value from a reduce the frequency of flaky specs interrupting the developer experience.
Yeah, so we're hoping that widget provides some value in that context as well, because now in the test failure widget, if a test fails in an MR pipeline and it's failing in master in the default branch, then you should get that notification. It's like, hey, this has failed 10 times in master in the last 14 days. And so that should be at least an indication where engineers are looking at it that might tell them that it's not their fault that the pipeline failed.
Yeah, let me, I'll definitely make sure and kind of I'll signal boost that to the team and say, oh, here's a way for us to get some information based on what was added on 13.8.
I was talking to Eric about this a little bit, and it's because the expansion of those tables is so much below where we were worried about. Like, we can absolutely add probably the full name of the tests in there, so you could query it a little bit more effectively and build some data from that as well.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I think we were also talking about like rolling it up, James. We had an issue or a conversation around instead of just purging the data after 14 days, we'd roll it up into a summary table, and then store that for a longer period of time.
So now I'm curious, do you have feedback from customers that are similar scale or like similar monorepo strategy as we are on where to take this test failures feature that maybe?
Not yet.
Okay.
So
Okay.
this feature just rolled out with 13.8. So we know that a lot of those monorepo folks are self-hosted, not on .com.
Okay.
So it's going to take a while for them to actually get this in their upgrade cycle.
Okay. Yeah. I wish I would have waited to bring up flaky specs with it. We just had a discussion on Tuesday in our team meeting about flaky specs, and now I'm thinking we should revisit it after some of this information.
So the same functionality is coming to the unit test report in 13.9. You'll probably see it on .com in a week or two. I think Scott is jamming through that pretty quick, and there will be a feature flag on it, so it'll be accessible there too.
Okay. All in the merge request widget, right?
It's in the merge request widget today. If you expand it, you see it.
Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Awesome.
So
Good
thanks for the
discussion today.
information. Yeah, I will look and see what could be helpful for us with the feature after really refining our need and what we're trying to do and seeing how the functionality aligns with that. And get back
Excellent.
to you. And I have a lot of get back to you before the next meeting.
All good. I'll bug you in a couple of weeks to remind you.
Sounds good. Hopefully I don't drop the ball like I did with Ricky on the issue.
Don't worry about that. I was gonna make it if you hadn't made it already. So thank you for making the issue.
Okay.
We got 5
awesome
minutes till
discussion
time. We could talk about how cold it is everywhere again, but I would stop the recording for that.
I think my sweater says it all.
All right. Thank you, guys. Gentlemen, I will upload this to Unfiltered later today, and we can distribute it to the various teams who can contribute there. All right. Thanks, folks.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.